and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. This week we've got school librarian Lisa Manganello joining us to share her lesson, Global Escape. This one's got some really cool features to it. I hope you're going to enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome back. I am super excited to get to talk to one of my New Jersey friends here who is a master at what she does, and she's sharing her mastery with us today. I'm very excited. So if you want to take a second, introduce yourself to us, that'd be great.
One of the librarians at South Brunswick High School. This is my 17th year in South Brunswick and my 17th year as a high school librarian. I actually started out straight out of library school as a split position for my current district. So I was split between kindergarten and first grade and the high school. So I taught both ends of the spectrum. And after about 4 years of doing both, I then moved to the high school full time, which is where I've been for the last, 14, 15 years.
That split just boggles my mind. Like you must have been out of your head dealing with the little kids and the big kids.
Well, I mean, not only that, but it was 3 different schools and it was a rotating 6-day schedule. So I did have this fear my first year that I would show up at the wrong school on the wrong day.
I have done that. I've not the wrong school, but I've shown up to the wrong class on the wrong day. Absolutely. Gotta love those rotating schedules. So how did you end up in school librarianship in the first place? What was sort of your journey to get here?
Okay, so what I love about librarians is that they all have this crazy backstory that makes us seem like we're Marvel characters, which is something I completely am on board with. I started out as an art history major. I went to school to be an art teacher. And then I decided I really was interested in art history. I got my bachelor's and my master's in art history. I worked for Princeton University as an art cataloger, which is essentially a librarian without the degree for art materials. And so through Princeton, I decided to go back to get my degree in library science. And I went to Rutgers. And the program at Rutgers, I was really interested in teaching. And I realized that because I taught at the community college level, I really enjoyed working with people and I like teaching. So I decided to go school library track as someone who did not come through a traditional teaching background. I did teach, like I said, at college, but I didn't teach in a K-12 environment. And so that was all something I had to learn when I got to my current district. So I very much credit South Brunswick for being the people that were responsible for how I developed as an educator.
It's such a different world, college and high school or grade school, depending on where you end up. So that must have been a really interesting transition.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I really loved it. I taught community college classes and I taught while I was a master's student at University of Pittsburgh. But I love both parts. I really enjoyed, even with my K-2 background and my older kids, I really enjoy the whole process of how people learn. So I think that that's something that's the same, whether you're talking to a kindergartner, a high schooler, or a college-bound student.
And I think the library is a great place for that too, where it's really just about finding the things that interest you as opposed to you've got to, read this book or you've got to take this test or whatever. So that's personally why I love it.
Strangely, I didn't like high school. So the idea that I would have ended up as a high school anything would have been really amazing to me as a young person. So I always tell my students that for some reason the teachers and the students are always they're amazed that I didn't like high school and I wasn't particularly good at it. And so I say to my students that are kind of struggling, with what they have to do to get out of high school. I was there. I mean, that was not my, going to high school was not my forte.
And I think that's what a great model that is for the students, because I feel like so often as educators, like we tend to model academics and scholarship and maybe ignore the fact that maybe we weren't all in that place when we started out.
And I also think it gives us I always feel like working with librarians is something I love doing, but inspiring people to think about librarianship as a career is something I constantly, if I find a student who has really good personal skills and they like to talk, I always say to them, you wouldn't think it, but librarians are really a great job for you because it's a service job. You're basically learning to work with the public. And if that's something you enjoy doing and you want something different every single day when you come to work, librarian is the perfect track for you.
Oh, absolutely. And school librarian, where you're doing something, you've got different students every year, you've got different things going on every year. Like you can you're not reinventing the wheel, but you can reinvent yourself and your lessons and what's going on in your school every year, which I love.
Exactly.
It's always new, always exciting. Speaking of new and exciting, you've got this great lesson, the global escape. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
So I try to develop my lessons so that they support things that my teachers are interested in or that they're having problems with. That's always where I start, because nobody wants to fix the lesson that is their favorite lesson. They want to fix something that they don't enjoy teaching. So through participating in meetings and being part of the school community, I realized that a lot of my students struggled with current events and how to find them and whether to judge them as credible and what kind of bias might be in the current events that they were accepting or the news outlets that they were visiting. So, and my teachers were noticing the same thing. So in New Jersey, a few years ago, we had program growth objectives in my district where we had to pick a topic, and it was sort of like an SGO for a classroom teacher might be. I had to pick an issue that I wanted to solve or I wanted to work on for the year. And each year I would pick something because I knew that my teachers understood the SGO pattern. I picked something that I could kind of mirror that with, so that they would be more apt to work with me because, as a librarian, I need students. And the only way I get students is if my teachers are engaged in what I want to teach and they bring their students to share with me. So I understood that this was an issue for my global teachers. And we teach global in the 11th grade primarily. And it's a social studies class that looks at the world and looks at it by region. So one of the assignments is for students to defined a current event to speak to periodically. So my global lesson starts with a picture. And I love doing that opening because I feel like everyone has something to say about a picture. Yeah. If you have a news article, you might have an issue with reading level, or you might have an issue with what their prior knowledge is. If you have a picture, and you ask a simple question like, my first question is, what do you see? And each year I change the photo so that it keeps it fresh and current for my teachers. And they've actually told me they look forward to what I'm going to pick for a particular year because they know it's going to be different. So this year, my choice was, it's a photo of a little boy. He went viral on Twitter and social media, and he's curled up in a blanket, laying on what looks like sand between two piles of rocks. And it's basically, that's all the information they have is what's on the screen. So I ask them to just tell me what they see. And they start simple. And this is where you can kind of pull kids into a lesson because there's no wrong answer here. So, they notice that he has bare feet. They notice that he has a blanket. They notice that he's by himself. They notice that he's, they start to speculate, where could this be? Because there's sand, and is it the beach? And these stones that are next to him. They start to extrapolate on, well, what could those be? And they inevitably come across the idea that they think they're graves because they think there are two of them, two mounds to them speak as graves. And then they're like, well, he's alone, so they must be the graves of his parents. And that's exactly the way the image was primarily shown on social media when it was circulated. But I then go through a series of context slides where I say, I'm going to give you a little more context now. And as we step through the context, I start with the original headline that circulated with the image, which attached it to a particular war. And then I move through slides through a fact-checking slide that I found on USA Today that kind of unpacks the image. And it actually presents it with the next image on the roll, which is the little boy sitting with the peace sign and like kind of mugging for the camera. And so that completely changes what we feel about that image.
Right.
And it turns out it was actually an art piece that was done. It had no connection to war. It's not even set in the part of the world that it went viral for. But it allows the students to see that just because something looks like what they think it is, it's not always that connection they're expecting.
Yeah,
this
we get
year,
so used to. Sorry, we just get so used to trusting our eyes, like seeing is believing, and so much of social media now is focused on that idea. And unfortunately, we have entered into an age when what you see is not necessarily what you can believe.
Exactly.
And I love that you're bringing in context. Like, to my mind, when it comes to information literacy, context and perspective are just the two key watchwords. And when we can get students to think about, how does this fit in with a bigger picture? Like, this is only a small slice of whatever we're getting.
Yeah.
What's the rest of it? So I love that. I love that so much. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no. I was going to say that this year, because of what's happening in Israel, they all connected it to that, which was interesting because when I started the lesson in September, we didn't have that context. So They didn't make that connection. So they were very much thinking about what's in the media and what do I know and how could this be connected?
Which is great. It's also a great lesson in sometimes we jump to conclusions because we think we have the context, but maybe we don't actually.
Yes, which we all need that lesson.
Yeah, seriously. I love too that you're doing this in collaboration with teachers, and the way you structured it, the way you explained your structuring of it really helps to highlight the fact that school librarians are teacher librarians, which I think gets missed by so many people so often. So kudos on that. That's outstanding. So the kids, they've got this picture, you walk them through, okay, now we've got the context. Where do we go from there in terms of the lesson?
So that's where I try to partner with my teachers, because each of my teachers is going to approach current events from a different direction. So that's my moment to kind of show the work that the teacher and I have done together. So I've always kind of draw them into the lesson at that point, and I say, okay, we're going to talk about current events, and we're going to go through how to find a current event, and we're going to use the way that most of you look for a current event. So I said, so when your teacher asks, go find a current event, what do you do? And inevitably someone will say, I go to Google.
Type it into Google and I type in current event.
Yes, you do. And that's what I model for them. I'm like, all right, well, then let's do that. Let's go to Google and type in current event. And so then they can see that I understand their process. Now I ask the teacher for some specifics. I say, okay, for your assignment, for your intention, what kind of current event are they looking for? And usually my teachers either have things that they'll allow them to use or not allow them to use. Like some don't want entertainment articles, some don't want sports, some have them focus on a particular region each marking period, depending on where they are in their studies. So it's very different for each teacher. So it's a good reminder for the students of what the expectations are for that class. And it helps me to then be able to pull out examples that connect with what we're looking for. So once I do that, I teach them how to Google properly. So we go to the fact that, you know what, I always say the world is an interesting place and you are interesting people. So find me an article that interests you, that fits the frame that teacher has for a current event. So I start by doing a little review. My kids do Boolean searching as freshmen. So I talk about the fact that this is how we're going to break down our keywords, and we're going to use and we're going to, use that searching convention because it helps us as researchers, and it also helps the tool, the database, or whatever I'm using to search the way I want it to. And then we go to the news tab. And then we look at, each teacher has specifics about what is what constitutes a current event. So
Mm-hmm.
some say it has to be within the last 5 school days. Some say it could be within a month. It just depends on the teacher. So we set the parameters of the search so that they have just those articles. And then we kind of look through and see, okay, well, now that we have this article set, what interests us? I often tell them to pick a country to begin with, because if there is a particular region that they're looking for, or to pick a subject they're interested in. I've done in the past different examples where I like this. My example this year was the Ukraine, because as a teacher, I was interested in what happens to students during an ongoing conflict. Is there school? Where is school? What does school look like? That was interesting to me because I'm a teacher and I wanted to know about that particular thing. So I structure my search, Ukraine and children and classrooms. And I got a set of results that all kind of fit those keywords. So it showed the practice. It modeled it for them so that they could see, okay, well, my steps for, and this is a good way to differentiate it too. My steps for some of my in-class support classes were pick a country, pick one thing you're interested in, one word, and pick one group of people that might be associated with that word and build your search with those terms. So that allows all of my students to be able to approach this from a constructive way that's going to fit their learning level.
I love that. I love that. I also love that you're working in how to use good search tools that are already there that so often they don't know about. And then you go, click this and click that. And now you've just got these certain results that you were looking for. And they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's those simple things that are so mind blowing. I love when I get to see the faces of the students as they grasp that.
I just love that we stop them from searching for current events.
Yes. That too. That is also important.
Yes.
So I love this.
Yeah. Well, once we have the current event article, so I put up a timer and I give them a set amount of time. I post the things they're looking for as a reminder. And then I give them about 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, they have to find an article. They have to read the article because that's key. You know, a lot of high school kids, you tell them to find an article, they find it, but they don't actually read it. Right. So I always incorporate that. You have to read the article so that you're familiar with the content. And then I have them in a shared document post the link and the reason they picked it and their name, so that I have a way to kind of gauge in the room how everyone is kind of moving through the assignment. So once that 15 minutes is up, they come back to me and I say, okay, well, now we're going to use a tool to try to evaluate whether or not this article we picked is credible. And that's a tool that I actually pulled off of the museum webpage, which is called Escape. And it's got a beautiful graphic and it just walks them through the different parts. Each of the letters have a different meaning to them. From different, it asks you to consider the dates and all of the things that we as librarians want them to be looking for in their searching. And we created almost like a checklist that they have to complete for that article. And it actually encourages them to do some lateral reading too. It's funny, I didn't know the term lateral reading until I learned it. And then I realized, oh, that's what we asked them to do. I just didn't realize that was what it was called.
Me too.
So we have them do, I feel fancy now when I say we have them laterally. Like I said that to my teacher today and I was like, we're going to make them do some lateral reading. And he's like, what is that? And I go, it's when we get more than one article when we compare. Yeah. So I have this document structured so that they have to find 2 more articles and they have to look at that first article critically so that they can tell if it's the type of article that's going to be a credible source to use for their current event.
I love that you build in not just that they are lateral reading, but that they are using that lateral reading as part of their analysis and comparison. I can just imagine how many different ways you could have discussions about that. Like, how are the differences between these articles standing out to you? Are there differences? If they are, what does that tell you? What do we think it means? Like, so many great conversations you could have there.
Yeah, absolutely. We look at word choice. We look at how people are referred, what the headline says. What title are they giving these people? Especially if we're looking at a political topic, like are they calling the President of the United States the President of the United States? Are they calling him by his first name? Are they calling him by his last name? Like all of that is a choice from the reporter's standpoint. So we really have them think about, well, what do the choices that are made in this article, like how does that change what I think about the article?
Which we're thinking about the perspective of our writers. We got to make sure we consider what's the perspective that we're getting. Man, I love it. I love it. I love it. So I love this. They've done some lateral reading. They've done some comparison. What are their next steps, or are we?
So what we do is that shared document. I have them in a final column. I have them go in and share one aspect of the escape tool, that kind of checklist that they're using. Did they feel best helped them to determine if an article is credible or not? And that's nice because I can project that at the front of the room and it shows them, I mean, they can all see each other's work. They can kind of type in the document, but then we can kind of talk about it together because I have everything gathered in one spot. So that's worked out really well because it allows me to kind of highlight people who, had an interesting article or had a different perspective. And so part of our kind of wrap up of the lesson is to look through that list and kind of have people, talk about what they found and what surprised them or what was confirmed by the work they did.
Reflection is such an important part of having students do any kind of work. And again, it seems like one of those things that kind of sometimes we blow past in the name of time, constraints. And I love that they're reflecting. And I especially love that you've got them very specifically talking about what strategy worked best for you. Because when they reflect on that, I can just see that being cemented into the brain and becoming like, I know now I'm going to go back to this and use this again.
Yeah. I hope that's the hope. And sometimes I end with, I actually changed it up a little bit. We had an article, I guess it was shortly after, I'm trying to remember what the world event was, but I happened to hear an article and a report on NPR while I was making dinner one night. And it was the night before I had to do the lesson. And it was about the fact that there is, false information coming out about different world events and how do we combat that? So I used that as my real close because I had them listen to it. It was about 3 minutes long. And, I think teens are naturally curious and they're a little jaded. I love high school because they're a little jaded. They think that, we're giving them assignments that don't have any meaning or don't make any sense. And so I had them speak to, well, how does what we just did fix this problem that the reporter is talking about now? So that kind of came full circle.
Nice. Man, that's awesome. Now you're doing this with high school students and it sounds like this could be like a class period, like pretty short, specific to the point.
Yep. This grew. It used to be about we're block scheduled. So we have 4 blocks a day. It's a 90-minute block. And I love my 90-minute blocks because for librarians, they're such a gift. They just give you time to work through the research process and really come out with, you have those natural pauses that allow you to do an opening activity, have them do work time, and then come back together for that reflection piece. I've never taught at a school that wasn't block scheduled, but I really love that aspect of where I teach. So I think that you can shorten this. There's a bunch of different ways you could do it. If you weren't block scheduled, you could have them come in with an article, or you could break it into tiny mini lessons and maybe do the article search as the conclusion of the day before. They go home, they find the article, they come in, you model what they're going to do, and then they do the piece where they're working through the article, and then maybe the reflection becomes homework and you refer back to it later. So there's ways to break it up, but my teachers found it to be so helpful that they like the block. They really, and for teachers, it's hard to get them to give up class time. There are so many demands on their time. I feel quite honored that they think this lesson is strong enough that they're willing to come into me and spend that 90 minutes with me.
And I think it speaks to the importance of the skills that you are able to introduce the students to the skill and then sort of tailor things to a specific teacher's needs, even though they're generally going the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, teachers are all going to be doing their own individualized version of whatever the curriculum says.
Yes.
And I think that really speaks to how important and multidisciplinary some of these skills are, that you can walk right in and be like, okay, since we're going in this direction, here's how we're going to adjust and fine tune as we go. Love it. I also want to circle way back to the very beginning. You said something that I think was really important when you said you were trying to figure out where this lesson came from. You mentioned that you participate in meetings and like department meetings, I'm assuming, and kind of hearing what teachers are doing. And I think that is such an important and valuable thing if school librarians are able to do it.
Well, when I started in my district, I was brand new and I was right out of Rutgers, and at Rutgers, people I had gone to a training with Hilda Weisberg, and she spoke to the fact that it's so important to be seen as a teacher and to be seen as a colleague and a professional and to attend anything you could get your hands on. That's the mentality I came into the job with. But when I got here, I remember my very first couple of days of new teacher training. I mean, they didn't know what to do with me because I was high school and kindergarten. They didn't know which training to send me to. But I remember really well that the language arts supervisor for K-5 didn't think I needed to be in the training because I was not an English teacher. I was not a language arts teacher. And I stuck it out. I stayed. And I thought I got so much out of what she was saying because I learned a lot about what the expectations were for the teachers I was going to work with. And that kind of stuck with me. So I think it's kind of funny. In my school, I think there are people who are like, Lisa will go to door openings because if you invite her, she'll come because she wants to know. And I try not to be obtrusive. I try to kind of hang back and see I just want to hear what's happening. I just want to be part of it so that I can hear both the positive, the things the teachers really love that they're being asked to do, and the negative, which is actually negative is more important to me because if there's something that's coming down the way and they all hate it, if I can find a way to make it easier for them, I am all in for that.
Yeah. I mean, talk about building goodwill. Boy, hey, I've come to lighten your load. I mean, what teacher doesn't want to hear that?
Exactly.
So what kind of feedback have you received from, let's start with the students as you've done this lesson, because you've done this several times before, right? This is not your first year doing this.
This is probably the 5th or 6th year we've done this cycle of lessons.
Love it.
It's funny. My students all, high school students are funny because it's a little pulling teeth to get them to talk about what they really think of the lesson. But when you are kind of wandering around behind them, you kind of hear, oh, I didn't know that. And it grows because then they'll be back in the library later in the week with me and I'll hear one of them go, you have to, sort by date. You don't search by current event. They kind of throw each other under the bus for what they have now learned and are going to speak to because they are now the experts. So,
right.
Yeah.
And how about the teachers? What have they had to say?
My teachers, I love my teachers. I am so lucky where I work. I have some of the best colleagues, I think, in the business. And I have gotten really good feedback and I learned so much by working with them. And like I said at the beginning, South Brunswick taught me how to teach. I did not know how to teach when I got here, and I certainly didn't know how to teach kindergartners, and I didn't know how to break down a lesson for high school. And a lot of that I learned by watching my colleagues. So, and I still do that. Last week, we did this great, one of my English teachers wanted to do an escape room for pre-reading for Fahrenheit 451, and we took all their devices and we locked them in a Chromebook cabinet, and we took all their phones and we locked them in a box, and we made them work their way out of the tech isolation that we had given them so that they could see the value of text. And it's so much fun to work with a teacher that's passionate about what he or she teaches because I'm constantly learning by listening to how they talk to the kids, listening to how they frame their questions, listening to how the type of wording they use, or the way they differentiate when they know a group has members that maybe are high flyers or that might need more support. I learn from all that, and I take all that in and I like use it in my own instruction.
I love that. If there was a job that was just sit and watch teachers teach, that would be an outstanding job.
Exactly.
It would be so wonderful. Anytime I get to kind of sit in on somebody else's classes and just kind of watch and see how they do stuff, you always get something. Like I've never been in a room that I haven't come away with like, oh, that's cool. Or, oh, I got to remember that. Yeah. It's such a rewarding opportunity.
And that's what was really special about my district and the reason I love it so much. And I say they taught me everything I know, but they did. And part of that was when I was a brand new teacher, I think they looked at me and went, oh, this girl is a hot mess, because, I didn't really know how to transition between tasks, and I didn't know how to, assess or get kids to repeat back directions to me so that I knew they understood them. And so what my district did, rather than writing me off, they kind of give me a big hug, and they were like, all right, let's put you in. And my K-5 principal put me in classrooms and said, we just want you to watch. And he said to the teachers, I want you to show her how to do transitions. I want you to show her how to do, how you're going to differentiate between these three kids. And I really watched that. And that was such a gift. So I would say to librarians, if you're having trouble getting into the classrooms, just ask to sit in the back and watch. And I know that's tough because a lot of us are the only one in our building that does our job. But if you rationalize it out for your principal and the fact that you really just want to learn, I think that's such a natural thing that I think they're much more apt to let you have that time, find a way to accommodate that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great piece of advice. I love that. So, what advice would you have for people who are maybe trying this lesson for the first time? Anything they should kind of have in their minds?
I always like to have, I'm very much a planner. I like to plan everything out. So in my world, like everything exists in my presentation. It's like my timers are all embedded. My documents are all embedded, everything. So that way, when I'm teaching it, I can be, dynamic, and I can move through my classroom, because I know that the structure of what I'm doing is there for me. I don't have to worry about where anything is or how to get to it. All of that is already established. And then the magic comes when the kids talk. And I think that this lesson is such a nice point to get kids to talk, because if you're our school is 3,000 kids. So, I don't know these children by name. I know some, but I don't know them all. I certainly can't call on them with confidence with their names. And my teachers do help me with that. But even then, we start this lesson the first week of school. So this is not, my teachers don't often know all their students' names on the first week of school. So I definitely think that this is the kind of lesson where you can set your classroom expectations for the fact that you're going to be supportive of every answer being a good answer. And anyone that is willing to, try and put themselves out there, they're going to have a lot of success with what's about to happen. And I feel like I've built that to my kids. So whether they come to me with ELA or they come to me for social studies or science, all of those lessons, I feel like they feel like, well, Mrs. Manganello will always make you look good. So you should talk, because she's gonna spin that answer so it's the right one.
It's such a great lesson for starting the year with. It's like saying, what do you see in this picture? Mm-hmm. Like you said, there's no wrong answers. No. Like you're there to just purely be supportive of, yes, absolutely. Yeah. What else? Let's keep going. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
Man, love it, love it, love it. Okay. We're going to kind of go in a different direction here, and we're going to take a book break. I'd love it if you could share a book that you've enjoyed. It could be personal. It could be for students. It could be for staff. It could be whatever.
I'm looking at my bookshelf as I do this.
Oh, yeah. I find myself very frequently going back to my bookshelf whenever somebody asks me, what's a book? Because there's so many, but remembering what the good ones that I have gotten to recently are sometimes a little bit of a challenge.
I am going to pick, wait, I'm only going to do one. I think I'm only going to do one. I think I will bring this. Okay, so Grown Up Reads. Amor Tolls, I love his work. It's a little much for most of my students. Not all, most. The one that I love the best is The Gentleman in Moscow. That is my all-time favorite of his works. And it's great because we do a global reads project with my kids. And that's one I can give my juniors and they will love it because it's basically starts off in it's like 1918. It's right after the Tsar is assassinated in Russia. And he is an aristocrat. He's been on the side of all the czars, but he has written enough that they kind of think he might be okay. So rather than just executing him, they put him in this hotel in the middle of Moscow. And his sentence is to remain in the hotel forever. He cannot set foot outside of the hotel. And the rest of the book is the quirky people he meets and the life he lives in this hotel until maybe he eventually escapes. That's probably my favorite adult book if you're looking for adult titles.
I love it. So it's sort of like a historical fiction and a almost slice of life, but a really unusual slice of life. Yes. And he is a likable character. I am big on likable characters. So he is such a likable character. If I had to spend, and I think in the end of the book, he spends like 50 years in the hotel, or maybe it's like 40 years in the hotel. If I had to spend 40 years in a hotel, I'd want him with me. Love it. Okay, that's going on my list.
Okay.
And you got another one that you want to share?
I do. You know what? I went to the...
Oh, yes.
Yes. I know you like this one too, right?
I love this one.
I met Jeff Zentner at the New Jersey Council of English Teachers Conference a couple of springs ago. And I hadn't read his work when I met him. And I was so taken by his story because he has this really great backstory. I mean, first of all, he's got like a leather jacket. He walked in like a leather jacket and jeans, and he just looked like a cool guy. And he talks about the fact that he wanted to be a musician. And then when he turned 30, he realized that nobody over 30 becomes a famous rock musician. So he had to make a life change. So he went to law school and he became a lawyer. And on the bus, he was going back and forth. He had about an hour ride. He wrote the books on the bus on his phone. And I was just like, I was like, I have to read these. So Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee is such a great book because it's like a laugh out loud. And that's one of those things that kids look for that are very hard to find. It's about two girls who are best friends and they see themselves and they're kind of like on the edge of their future, like most of our seniors are. And they each have different ideas about what that future looks like. And they have these wacky adventures over the course of the last few months of their senior year that just
wacky,
really will.
But realistic, like wacky, but things you could imagine kids really doing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, they like at one point they go to a convention, it's like a Comic-Con almost where they're there. And like, you're thinking, 17-year-olds don't always have the best judgment, and you're going, this is exactly what a 17-year-old in my high school would do if they were given permission to go away with their three friends. You would end up in just as much trouble.
Yes. Oh, I love that book so much. I literally was laughing out loud so much as I read it that my wife said, you can't read that at night because you're keeping me out. Such a good book.
I was in the airport and I was like, people are looking at me wrong because I was like, I just laughing. It was so funny.
My situation was I read that book first as my first Zentner, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is so funny. I got to read more of his stuff. And then I picked up In the Dying Light, and I was like, this is an amazing book, but it is not funny.
It's not funny.
And then I was like, maybe I just got, a bad one. So I'll go to the next one. Yep. And I picked up the Snake King.
The Serpent King? I tried Serpent King, and I didn't get into it before I read this. And I haven't gotten back to it.
I started it and I got a couple of chapters in and I was like, this is not going to end well. I can't take the emotional, like he's so good at hitting the emotions. And I was like, I got to put this one down.
Yes. Into the Dying Light has one of my favorite lines, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, but it's about the fact that when things are broken and you mend them, they become stronger because of the mending, and how that is true with people. And I pull that out all the time for kids. I'm like, that's such a great quote.
Yeah. He's just a great author. He really is. Mm-hmm. I love it. All right. So we've got an awesome lesson. We've got some awesome books in our to be read piles. How can people find you if they want to track you down in the future or reach out? Where are they going to find you?
Sure. Well, I've sort of stopped my Twitter page. It's still out there, and SBHS Librarian will get you to me, but I don't post there much anymore. It's gone a little to the dark side, and I just don't. I've kind of walked away. I've joined the Blue Sky, so you can also find me there at SBHS Librarian. I'm glad to take emails. I usually use my school email for that, which is lisa.manganello@sbschools.org. You're welcome to email me there too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for bringing your enthusiasm. This has been wonderful. I'm so glad we got to do this.
It's so fun to talk to you. I do it anytime.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.